So number one, Mass Effect is not dead. And it's not dead specifically because EA says it's not dead. Okay, every time you see someone say that it's been confirmed and it's official, that Mass Effect is over and it's done and there's never going to be any more Mass Effect games, that is patently false. And I'll include a link in the description to the story that proves that it's false. Because just last week at Gamescom, EA Executive Vice President Patrick Soderlund said that it's false. He said that Mass Effect's not done, and he takes ownership of it personally and says it's my job to make sure that Mass Effect comes back in the right way. Okay, so that's number one. The stories and all of the clickbait and the nonsense that is going on, particularly with a lot of YouTube channels that are absolutely pandering right now, and they're trying to drum up this false hysteria that Mass Effect is somehow over because that looks good in a thumbnail. This is a bunch of horse shit. The franchise is not over because there's way too many people talking about it in order for the franchise to be over. Okay, that's a serious misconception that to think because you've had one misstep in a series of games and you've got this one installment of the series that didn't live up to the tremendous standards set by earlier games that now the franchise is over. Okay, that's ridiculous. And I'll actually go into detail about what's a dead franchise and what's not. But I just want to say right up front, two things. Mass Effect's not dead because EA is specifically saying that it's not dead. Okay, and if you want to be cynical and underestimate Patrick Soderlund's comments and say that they don't matter, again, I'll go into detail in a little bit about why you are dead wrong, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But also, number two, if you just take a pulse on what the gaming community's reaction is right now to the BioWare blog post saying we're not going to make any DLC for Andromeda, if you just measure that, which I guarantee you EA is doing, this isn't not just my extrapolation. I mean, I think it goes without saying that EA is keeping a very close eye on what people's reaction to this is. And I think everything that they're doing is very measured and very calculated at this point. Then I don't think there's any way you can draw a logical conclusion that Mass Effect as a franchise is over. Hello and welcome to the Exalted March, where we talk about storytelling in video games and the business of the video game industry. So I want to go over those three things. I want to go over, number one, the fact that the franchise for Mass Effect is not dead. Number two, it is definitely coming back. And again, I'm not going to walk back that statement. It is definitely coming back. Mark my words. And number three, it's a good thing that it's taking a break. I know some of you aren't going to want to hear that, but it is a good thing that Mass Effect goes away for a little bit. So I think on the flip side of what I'm saying, I do think that there is a lot of hysteria that is being drummed up by people who want nothing more than for you to click on their stupid YouTube video and to watch their stupid blog post. To read their stupid blog post. I think there's a lot of people who just think that the words Mass Effect failed, Mass Effect death, Mass Effect abandoned, all this other shit that's out right now, it just gets views. And so that's all they care about. I'm really conflicted on whether or not I should call out a couple of channels in particular. I mean, I'm so small, and some of these channels that I want to criticize are so big, it's not going to matter anyway, but it's some real, just ridiculous crap that's on YouTube right now, with no depth, with no meaningful analysis whatsoever. It's just a bunch of... Essentially, they're memes. They're not memes in the way that people traditionally think of as memes, but I mean, they're memes in the sense that they're sort of like these little these thought viruses that sort of get around and then people just start repeating them. There's no substance to them. There's no depth to them. There's no actual analysis of the business that's at work. Anyway, I don't want to get off track. Again, three things. The franchise is not dead. The franchise is definitely coming back at some point, but for right now, and this is my third point, it should go away for a little bit. So the reason why I say it's definitely not dead, Patrick Soderlund, who is EA's executive vice president, he was at Gamescom in Cologne recently last week, and he was talking to Game Reactor, and he said something, it's a whole long quote that he gave. I thought it was a great statement that he made, but essentially, I'm just going to read the last part of it here. So he says, quote, "What we need to be careful of is whenever we bring back Mass Effect again, we have to make sure that we bring it back in a really relevant way and in a fresh, exciting place. That's my job, and that's Casey Hudson's job, and BioWare and the Mass Effect team's job to figure out what that looks like, and that we don't know yet, but we will." Okay, that is an incredible statement, and it's a little bit longer. Again, I'll include the link so you can read the full statement for yourself. One of the things that you need to be very perceptive of when trying to make any sort of assessment of what a video game company is going to do is being good at knowing what is a PR statement and what is not. So this statement from Patrick Soderlund is not a press release statement. This was not something that went through 5 or 6 people for edits in the PR department. Fortunately, Patrick Soderlund is someone who is high enough He's high enough in the executive leadership of EA that he can say something if he wants to. If he wants to make an off-the-cuff statement, he can, and it's important to note that this is not a carefully manicured PR statement because it represents something that he actually believes and that he actually thinks. When somebody that high up in a company says, it's my job to do this, he's taking ownership of that from an executive leadership standpoint, and that absolutely matters. If you think that he is saying that in this manner and that it does not matter, that that's just EA kind of trying to pander and they're just kind of trying to dangle some hope alive, trying to dangle some hope that the franchise will stay alive when it won't, I really have to question how much you actually understand about what happens in businesses and why. When someone who is an executive expresses an opinion that they would like for something to happen, or, I mean, he's actually doing much more than that. He's actually saying it will happen and I'm going to make sure that it happens. That is huge. That means way more than just about anything else. I mean, things happen in big companies like EA because an executive wants it to or because they don't. I mean, that's the number one factor in whether or not Mass Effect is going to come back or not, is does the executive leadership of EA want it to come back? And he's saying that he does. And he's saying that he's going to make sure that it comes back. Okay, so whatever other aspects you want to look at, okay, it really almost doesn't even matter how disappointing Mass Effect Andromeda was or it wasn't. It really doesn't matter how many memes there are about the facial animations before it was patched in Mass Effect Andromeda. And with respect to all of the people who are feeling really disappointed right now because you're huge fans of the series and you're just mad right now, you're mad, you're disappointed, with all due respect to your feelings and how cynical you must feel right now, your cynicism also doesn't matter. What matters is that someone in a position of authority at EA has said, this is going to come back and here's why, and here's the people who are going to be responsible for it. That matters. It matters vastly more than any of the cynicism that may exist on social media right now in regards to Mass Effect. Okay, so number one, that's huge. So the franchise is definitely coming back. And then also, just kind of, this is kind of a lesser point, but I think it's still worth noting. This is not what a dead franchise looks like. Okay, a dead franchise does not have this much discussion going on about it and when it's going to come back, and this much fervor and this much passion amongst the fan base. A franchise dies when people stop giving a shit. Okay, when people no longer care, that's when a franchise is dead. Do you guys remember Kickle Cubicle back in the day on NES? Do you guys remember that game? You kick around little ice cubes. It's like a little puzzle game. Kickle Cubicle, or as I like to say, Kickle Cubicle. That's how I like to pronounce it. Do you know of anyone who's griping about the fact that we haven't gotten another Kickle Cubicle game? Okay, do you know where the Kickle Cubicle fan community base is at and where they're all clamoring for a new entry in that franchise? Okay, that's what a dead franchise looks like. Okay, when nobody even remembers what the hell you're talking about, that's what a dead franchise looks like. Okay, what about Streets of Rage? Do you guys know who's clamoring for another Streets of Rage game to come out? That franchise was huge. I love Streets of Rage. That was a great game back on the Sega Genesis. That was a trilogy. I mean, people loved that. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Nintendo bought up a bunch of Sega Genesis licenses and they did the whole classic game releases on the Wii. I want to say somewhere around 2007, Streets of Rage 3 might have gotten packaged in with some of those old classic arcade game downloads on the Wii store. Yeah, that was in 2007. That was 10 years ago. And that's like the last little blip on the radar from Streets of Rage, and that was like a mega franchise for the Sega Genesis in the 90s. Okay, do you hear? I mean, I'm sure there's some Streets of Rage fans out there. I'm a Streets of Rage fan. Do you hear some big? Do you see a bunch of YouTube videos about the future of that franchise? No? Okay, great. Just stamp dead franchise on that thing. That's what a dead franchise looks like. What about Altered Beast? Anybody remember Altered Beast from the Sega Genesis days? I fucking loved Altered Beast. That was a great game. Okay, do you hear anybody clamoring about more Altered Beast games? Okay, that's what a dead franchise looks like. Do you know what's not a dead franchise? Beyond Good and Evil. Seriously, do you know what a not dead franchise looks like? It's going to be 15 years pretty soon after the first Beyond Good and Evil came out. So we're looking at a minimum 15-year gap between Beyond Good and Evil and Beyond Good and Evil 2. That's not a dead franchise. Specifically because there's too many damn people talking about it in order for it to be a dead franchise. I mean, also we know that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is in development, but for several years there, it was like, well, it was kind of announced that it was in development, but then it definitely wasn't, and then it was canceled and then not canceled. So it's not a direct comparison. I'm just saying games can go away for a long time and the franchise isn't dead. Mass Effect is definitely not dead. Mass Effect is also definitely coming back. So that's my second point. I've already given you the Patrick Soderlund quote about why, and that really should be enough for you to understand that the intent and the initiative within Electronic Arts is to make a way for Mass Effect to come back. But also, I just want to point out something. EA often takes a ton of criticism. Sometimes it's very merited. It's very warranted criticism for being very profit motivated, being very profit oriented. One of the things that you really have to understand about Mass Effect in the future of the franchise is that profit is exactly what's going to bring the franchise back. Okay, the desire for profit is what is going to ensure that Mass Effect does come back. Goodwill is not going to bring Mass Effect back. Post on social media talking about how much we missed the game is not going to bring the franchise back. YouTube channels aren't going to bring it back. Posts and articles on major gaming sites are not going to bring it back. Somebody at EA is going to look at their portfolio of properties that they own, and in a few years, when the negative fallout and the negative feedback from Mass Effect Andromeda dies down, someone's going to look at their portfolio of franchises, their portfolio of licenses, and they're going to say, hey, we're sitting on this Mass Effect property. We're sitting on this franchise. It's been a few years. And yeah, there were some negative feelings about the last game we did in the franchise, but it's been 3 or 4 years now. It's been 5 years now. And if we start up a development cycle now, by the time this game comes out, it's going to be 7, 8, 10 years since Andromeda came out. And we'll definitely be profitable on this. And if there's definite profit to be made, there's no way they just let that sit in their catalog of titles and don't do anything with it. That's impossible. I understand there's a lot of cynicism and a lot of disappointment right now around the Mass Effect franchise, but don't be ridiculous. If a company has a property that can make money for them, they are going to make money with it. Now, whether or not they bring it back, as Patrick Soderlund said he wants to do, in the right way, in a way that's going to live up to the pedigree of the earlier games in the original trilogy, I don't know. That's going to remain to be seen. But profit will definitely, the motive to earn more profit will definitely bring Mass Effect back at some point, because you do not waste a property like that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The game's definitely going to come back. That all being said, it's very important that we leave Mass Effect alone for a little bit. And I know that's going to be a really hard thing for a lot of people to accept. I would like to think of myself as one of the biggest Mass Effect fans that there is. I like to say that nobody loves Mass Effect more than I do. Okay, I thought that Andromeda was a really enjoyable game. I say personally, I loved Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, when I say that, that's not an assertion about what anyone else should feel about it. I understand the game has flaws. I absolutely recognize that it has flaws. From a purely objective standpoint, it's a very flawed game. I'll probably be doing more videos in the future breaking down on a more analytical, detailed level specifically what the flaws are, because I think, honestly, again, for as much as has been said about Mass Effect, there's so much that people don't criticize it correctly. They don't criticize it in the right way, in my opinion. They talk about a lot of surface stuff. I don't think I've seen one video on YouTube, and I've watched a lot of them. I don't think somebody send me a link if this exists. I don't think one person has talked about the pacing problem in Mass Effect Andromeda's plot in a YouTube video. I don't know if anyone's written a blog about it and I just haven't read it. I don't think one person has called out the fact that when you get to Havarl and Vold, there is a significant writing problem with the plot of Mass Effect Andromeda. Okay, if you understand pacing in an overarching story in this manner, you understand there's a massive gap, okay, in the pacing of Mass Effect Andromeda, where you can see it. You can sort of see the blueprints of it. You can see where the writers didn't know how to keep up the pace of the story during that section of the game. I don't think anybody's talked about that. So yeah, I mean, that's a separate video, but Mass Effect Andromeda has tons of problems. I get it, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But, all that being said about how much I liked it and how much maybe a few other people liked it, they got to take a break. And for people that are saying, no, they don't, and the game is so great, and they should just release DLC for it the way they normally would, you're 100% wrong. I do think that it gets criticized more than it should, but because of that, EA and BioWare have to operate in the reality of what's happened. What I mean by they have to operate in the reality of what's happened is even if the truth is that Mass Effect Andromeda is a better game than it's given credit for, even if the truth is that it's been criticized too harshly, the reality is the perception of Mass Effect is such that if you look at the amount of expenditure required to develop a really high quality DLC, which is by far what they need, the last thing you would want to do is release a DLC that's not amazing. Okay, they wouldn't even be able to get away with releasing a pretty good DLC. Okay, after the flack that Mass Effect Andromeda got, and when you think about the damage done to the Mass Effect brand, and quite frankly, the damage done to BioWare's brand, and by extension, I mean, EA's brand is, it's dicey at best, but BioWare had a certain pedigree. You take away Dragon Age 2, and you pretty much have a catalog of games across BioWare's history that's a can't-miss category, or a can't-miss catalog. They're pretty much, they bat close to 1,000. And then with Mass Effect Andromeda, that does damage to your brand. That does damage to BioWare's brand. It does damage to Mass Effect's brand as a franchise. So when you take all of those things into consideration, you can't even get away with doing a pretty good DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda. You would have to do a tremendous DLC. So, and you think about the time and the effort and the money that you would have to spend to do that. And then you have to fight all of the perception of Mass Effect Andromeda not being a good game. There are only so many people who pay attention to all of the patches and all of the updates and who watch the comparison videos of 1.10 versus the original game. There's not that many people who do that. So you're fighting all of that when you go into the plan of trying to make a DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda, and quite frankly, I don't think it's a smart move. I don't think it's a smart move to mount all of those resources that you're going to need to put into a DLC to make it incredible, just to face all of that negative perception. It's an uphill battle, and I think you're better off not messing with it. What I do think you should do, what I do think is a smart decision, is to wait. Is to wait several years, to wait 3, 4, maybe 5 years at most, before you get some principal people together. You get Casey Hudson together, if he's still around with BioWare, and I think Casey, now that he has rejoined BioWare, I think he's going to be around for a good while. And if you can get Drew Karpyshyn in on this reboot, you get Drew Karpyshyn in on it. Okay, you bring in some key principal creative people after a few years, and you say, okay, how do we restart the Mass Effect franchise? How do we get as close to what our initial vision of this franchise was initially? And how do we bring it back in a way that's going to be super impactful and it's going to get everybody back to the Mass Effect franchise? And if you start that process a few years from now, and you look at, a 3, 4, 5 year development cycle, again, you're probably going to be looking at the next Mass Effect game, 2025 or later, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing. And another example of a franchise that's not dead, and I like to sort of use this as an example, as a comparison, so we can really figure out what we're looking at here. Another franchise that's not dead? Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is definitely not a dead franchise, right? Tomb Raider, the 2013 reboot, and particularly Rise of the Tomb Raider, which, got a lot of talk as a Game of the Year contender, which it absolutely should have, because Rise of the Tomb Raider is a really badass game. It's tremendous. That's a franchise that's not dead. Okay, do you remember Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness? Do you remember the last game that came out kind of like in that first saga, first generation of Tomb Raider? That is a shitty video game. I mean, that is just a garbage game. It's terrible. It's an absolutely awful video game. Okay, well, that game did not kill Tomb Raider. And actually, the one before that, I forget what the title was. That was a terrible video game, too. And then they had the kind of second-gen Xbox 360 lineup of Tomb Raider games, Legend, and I don't know what the other one was. There's a couple of them. I think there was 3 of them. Those were all super mediocre games. Okay, they weren't terrible. They were just, that was like 3 Mass Effect Andromedas in a row. It was just super mediocre, middle of the road. They weren't absolutely awful, but they were just so generic and uninspired, hardly worth playing. Those games didn't kill the Tomb Raider franchise. I think the last of those came out somewhere in 07, 08, somewhere around there. So you had a 5-year gap. You had a 5-year gap where Tomb Raider went away. Tomb Raider was gone. Tomb Raider was dormant. Tomb Raider was quote-unquote dead, according to the same people who are now proclaiming that Mass Effect is dead. And then the Tomb Raider reboot, the Tomb Raider 2013 game comes out. And it's tremendous. And all of a sudden, Tomb Raider is fucking back. because in reality, it was never dead. But the smart thing to do is, you see, by the time you get to 2013 and you've got the new Tomb Raider game come out, nobody even remembers the Angel of Darkness anymore. That's like a forgotten game. When you bring that up to people, like people laugh about it. Like, oh yeah, I remember how terrible that was. That was like a real 1 out of 5 game. People completely forgot about it. So, and that happened, in a matter of a few years. And so that franchise, that brand of Tomb Raider, it's as strong as it's ever been. But it needed a few years. You needed to have that franchise go away for a little bit so that people can kind of completely forget about the missteps that were there. So that's exactly what should happen with Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect should go away for a few years. I don't think they should plan on releasing anything earlier than 2025. That would be the date that I would set. Maybe if you only want to wait a year or two and you start to crank up a 5-year development cycle, maybe you get something out, 2023, maybe the earliest. And I think that they'll do tremendously well. I think that the nostalgia and the memories of the original trilogy will carry that next Mass Effect game to tremendous sales numbers. And if they handle business, and if they take their time and don't rush anything, and they get their A-team on it, that's so important. If they get people who, I don't even think the creative team is necessarily the problem, although I think that the writing was much weaker and that there were some pedestrian mistakes made, particularly in the plot and the pacing of Mass Effect Andromeda. I think the biggest issues with it was the timetable and how many times they had to restart development. I think from a project management standpoint, they had some real big missteps. So get your A-team, get the veteran producers on it who are, again, not even worrying about the creative aspect of it initially. Just make sure that your pipelines and that your workflows and your processes are all set up perfectly, and then bring in your A-team creatives to get a good storyline set up. I think if you do that, Mass Effect's going to come back several years from now, and it's going to be tremendous. For now, look, just go play something else, okay? Video game franchises go away a lot, and trust me, I mean, I'm the type of person who, for a long time, I was on a period where my gaming activity was going down pretty low. I really wasn't playing very much stuff, and the only thing that really got me back in was Mass Effect, BioWare games in general, Dragon Age and Mass Effect, because I just like those games. So for everyone out there who feels like, you know what, the only stuff I can play is BioWare games. The only stuff I can play is story-driven RPGs where there are dialogue options and custom characters, and I gotta have that because that's the only thing that sort of scratches that itch for me from a gaming standpoint. I get it, and I can totally relate to that, but let me just say, give some other stuff a chance. Go play Horizon Zero Dawn. Seriously, if you haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn, go play that immediately. As a Mass Effect fan, as a Dragon Age fan, you will love it. Trust me, that is a new franchise just starting out, and we're going to see a lot more of that series in the years to come. Go play that. Okay, give some of the more recent Assassin's Creed games a chance. I've been on a huge Assassin's Creed tear. I know it's not the same as BioWare stuff. There's no dialogue options, but there's pretty cool narrative stuff. There's pretty cool open world stuff. Go check that out. I mean, my God, if you haven't been playing the Witcher series, what are you doing? Go play The Witcher 3 and all the DLC. Blood and Wine is amazing. There's a lot of other stuff you can go out there and play. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming up that's going to be lots of fun. You know what? Give Anthem a chance, okay? Just give it a chance. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to love it. Just give it a chance. Wait for it to go on sale. Give it a chance. And you know what? Most importantly, Dragon Age 4 is going to be coming out, and that's something we should all absolutely be looking forward to. So again, for all of you folks out there who are making these sort of doom and gloom, hysteria, creating clickbait style content, cut it out. Okay, quit your bullshit. Okay, the franchise is not dead. It's going away for a little bit, and that's just what needs to happen. It'll come back when it's the appropriate time. And for those of you who are really bummed out and you're really feeling cynical, listen, I get it. I love Mass Effect as much as anybody, and it sucks that it's going to have to go away for a little bit, but it's the right move. And when we get more Mass Effect, we're going to get it in the right way. So I hope I was at least reasonably sensible. I hope I could have been way more brief, way more succinct. This is getting close to 30 minutes, so I'm sorry for the length. I had no script for this. I had no notes for this. This was totally off the cuff. This was a complete rant. I hope that I tapped into some of the things that you've been feeling. If you're as frustrated with the sensationalism that people are talking about right now, the sensationalism that is being applied to the Mass Effect franchise and its future, it's been getting kind of annoying for me. I wanted to kind of do this rant to just kind of have a more measured view of things, and I hope that I succeeded in this. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. If you agree, hit that like button. If you don't agree, get down to the comment section and tell me what your thoughts are, and let's have a discussion about this. But thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, Masaranis, and until next time.